right, everybody. Welcome back to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Drive Safe Dave here. And basically what I have on screen, on camera, on the show is cents per mile right here, throwing it at me. What are you guys doing? How you doing, Charles? How you doing, Paul?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having us on.
Doing pretty good. Just ate some pizza. Oh, am I muted? Yep.
You just did what? Ate some pizza?
Yeah, I just ate some pizza. You know, obvious pizza parties, it's something drivers don't really get to take advantage of, but I did today.
You know, I personally, we don't have, y'all have Christmas parties anymore, company Christmas parties? Y'all have those?
Yep.
Y'all do? We've pretty much been banned. We've been thrown out of the last two places we did Christmas parties. We're not welcome back there anymore. They got a little, I don't know if it
nog a little too much.
I don't know if it was the nog. It was something, but it wasn't the nog. We've been told it's good. Y'all can have your Christmas party, just not here anymore. So we're trying to figure out, and until we get clearance and a permit, we're probably not going to be having one anytime soon. We just so
what I'm hearing is everything is bigger in Texas except for the parties.
Yeah, you know. Oh no, had you been to one of the parties, you would have thought, "Wow, this is racy." But you know, those days are over. So, all right, guys, let's talk real quick. Christmas. I'm going to ask you, are y'all ready?
No.
Yeah, I mean, as ready as you're gonna get, I guess.
I've got 3 kids and all their birthdays are in December, so this time of year gets a little rough.
Oh my God!
I got a wife and 1 kid, and her birthday's in December, so it's like birthday shopping, Christmas shopping, and I learned early on, first year of marriage, that you can't combine them.
So I'm just going to go out on a limb here, Paul. March is a big month for you. I mean,
well, so yes.
Well,
if
all your kids' birthdays are in December, I'm thinking big month for Paul in March.
Well, actually, yeah. So my wife's birthday is on the 13th, and then her family, like, my wife is like 75% like just straight Irish. She comes from a big Irish Catholic family, and they have a party, and there's like usually like 200 people at their family's St. Patrick's Day party. Like, they rent out venues and stuff like that.
Wow.
Weddings are huge. Yeah. So I mean, for her, it's a big month, and she usually has a lot of fun.
Hence, all your children's birthdays are in December.
Fair enough. That's it.
Hey, so a couple of some of my favorite funerals were Irish wakes. I'm just gonna let you know, had a blast. It was actually a fun party. They broke out a keg, and there was a concert. I mean, I'm just telling.
That's basically every holiday, pretty much. It's like, but in the case of funerals, like, obviously there's a funeral, they're all super Catholic, so a lot of standing up and sitting down, nothing wrong with that. It's very somber, very beautiful ceremonies, and then then it just turns into an actual celebration, a giant drunken celebration.
Well, I'll tell you, you know what? Next time, make sure if ever, I could be a long lost uncle if you'd like. I'm good. I'll show up in a cowboy hat and make sure I sing my Irish songs as well. Hey,
for sure. Next time one of my wife's relatives die, I'll let you know.
hey, there's a wake coming up. Make sure you invite Drive Safe. Yep. All right, so let's talk a little bit about cents per mile, guys. Y'all are both the hosts of Cents Per Mile. Tell me, Charles, why don't you tell me really the mission of Cents Per Mile and what you get from it?
So the whole idea behind Cents Per Mile is to bring awareness to those tough topics, things that people might not want to discuss because it might be too taboo of an answer, where they know the answer but no one really talks about it. Bring awareness to it, bring different perspectives from different sides of it, both drivers and industry professionals, and just put it out there and let people digest it and come to a conclusion.
So in regard to that, in that statement, Paul, why don't you tell us really quick about a recent evaluation y'all did, or a 48-hour experience. Why don't you tell me about that? I'd like to hear why, what the purpose of it, and then how that turned out.
Well, so I recently lived and worked out of a storage closet at the CDL Life headquarters for 48 hours. and followed hours of service as an office employee. So my whole thing was, so, we talked about it yesterday on the show. Like my job, I go around and make videos for trucking companies, in some proactive content, but basically I talk to drivers for a living and like pick their brains and find out what's going on. And one thing that I've heard a lot is, we have this tendency, that the industry is still pretty dead set on having like a lot of really long haul freight and expecting a lot of over the road drivers to be at about 3 weeks at a time. And then on top of that, every time I'm dealing with the driver, interviewing them or filming them, it's always like, all right, but I've got to load at this time. My hours reset here. I got to go. So I've always thought that it was this super over constrictive type thing, in that you also hear in the office when that comes up, the answer is always, well, you signed up for this. If you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't be a driver. Or, if a dispatcher isn't available, it turns into, we work long hours too. And I was like, I think that's apples and oranges. So why don't we find out? And I just basically moved into a storage closet for 2 days, used an app to keep track of my hours and my logs. And that's what I did.
And the result final, do we have to stay tuned for the result to figure out how it went?
So we actually turned it into about an 18-minute mini documentary that actually drops by the time this episode is done. It'll actually drop on the CDL Life YouTube channel. So that
Nice.
I think 12:30 Central. You should still finish this episode, but around 12:30 Central, it should drop on the CDL Life YouTube channel and LinkedIn and all that.
That's fine. So here's the breaking news. Right from here, you can drive immediately following this. After you like us on your post, you can go ahead and jump over there and see the mini documentary. Is 18 minutes considered a mini documentary? I'm just curious. There's that.
It's kind of, I think it's kind of that weird area between a documentary and a mini documentary. I think it's got to be over 30 to be a documentary. But yeah, I mean, it's the idea. It tracks the whole 2 days. And that was my intent, was just to show that, hours of service is tight for drivers, but I learned a lot. Even talking to Charles, my co-host, who he spent a lot of time in a truck. I found out hours of service is not as constrictive as I thought, but there's other factors that come into play that put me on a really, really, really intense spiral that kind of ended in sort of a dark place. But there's definitely some hope at the end. I don't want to give away the spoilers, but yeah, it definitely changed my perspective. And just like with everything we do with cents per mile, our goal is if we can change the way that one person operates or thinks, that can impact a driver's life, or experience, just one person to one driver, then we've done our job.
You had also you had mentioned to me, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about it. You were reacting to the rule of, what is it y'all did? You also did an experiment and documented it. You did one where you were talking about no idling in California. Yep. Y'all basically got in a truck. So why don't you tell us about that?
Pretty much, we got in a truck in 95-degree weather, rolled up the windows, didn't run the truck or use an APU, essentially to, in a sense, protest and draw attention to how inhumane idling laws are. And a lot of people were like, well, you could just roll down the window. Well, if you're parked somewhere terrible, which you have very little control of, considering there's 11 trucks for every parking spot or something like that, you can't always just roll your windows down. It's not like you're stopping in your driveway or on the yard and you don't know who's out there. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's a really easy way to get all your stuff stolen and, killed or maimed.
And I'm going to tell you, in 95-degree weather, I don't care if you roll your window down or not, it's hot.
It got up to 114 degrees.
It's miserable.
Yeah, it is miserable. And having been on the road myself for 20 years, I do know a little bit of the ills and the injustices that you speak. Let me ask you, do you do these extremes and stuff, these drastic actions? Do you do these so that we can have drastic change?
Yeah. That's the thing is that's, and Charles can speak to it here in a second because, his take on it's awesome. But yeah, that's the whole idea is there's so many things that are, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's so many things that by themselves aren't bad. It's a collection of things that when you put them together, because everybody looks at hours of service isn't that bad. That's not untrue. Getting paid per mile isn't that bad. That's not untrue. Driver dispatcher relationships are necessary and they're not always bad. That's true. But there's certain things that when you put them together, nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about the interaction of multiple things that creates this environment. You know, like you got older drivers who are all retiring and they can't get any millennials or Gen Z to really get into trucks. And that's because the job has turned into something terrible. And that's because of not any one thing, but the way everything interacts in the driver experience. And our goal is to draw attention to that to help people rethink the way they go about things.
Charles, why don't you speak to that? I mean, you obviously driven a truck, and you know full well how difficult it can be out there on the open road. We can't sit here and go through every one of the difficulties that drivers face, but it is a much different environment to live in and out of on a regular basis. And I do like, how do you feel that drawing attention to those differences, how have you seen that take shape in your show?
So that's a great question, and the goal was always to go out there and bring awareness to things that maybe people aren't looking at until someone brings awareness to this particular issue. You know, much like Paul said, with the dispatcher, the driver, the hours of service, the rules and regulations, these things aren't individually terrible on themselves, but when you merge them together, they're generally causing this friction zone because they conflict with one another. And it paints this less than ideal picture for what trucking needs to be and what it's going to do to the drivers and bringing new driver talent into the industry. You know, I grew up in this industry. I remember riding with my dad. I remember going to work with my dad, working on the truck, seeing the drivers. And you look at that from not that many years ago to now, and it's changed drastically. And what has changed? Well, we as an industry have changed. We kept piling more and more and more into this industry and what we ask of our drivers. But what we haven't done is pile more and more into our effort to make it attractive to those drivers. So here we have this whole predicament where we're trying to figure out, how do we attract new drivers? Well, hey, it's not hard. Let's put ourselves in their shoes. Let's actually listen to the drivers, and maybe not as so many suits sitting around a table somewhere that never hopped in the truck or even been to a truck stop, and they don't know what it feels like to go through these unloading and loading procedures and then be forced off the premises because we don't have room, but we don't really care about your hours of service running out, or that you don't have parking and maybe the $20 or $50 that we can spare as a company to get you paid parking might help. These are all little things that add up. And when we're looking at the longevity of a driver's life in this industry, these are things we need to consider. We need to make trucking sexy again.
You know, and as you talk about it, and you talk about bringing this stuff in, we looked at ATRI's website, American Trucking Research Institute. The top 10 things that drivers are concerned about compared to the top 10 things that carriers are concerned about don't mirror one another very well. Nope. I think there's only one or two items on those two top 10 lists that and they're ranked way differently. Like number 1 is way down here on number 10, and these are just the top 10, not the whole list. And it to me, it worries me, and it worries me that we're not on the same page. How are we going to solve the same problems if we're not on the same page? And I like that you guys are drawing attention to these things that need to be drawn attention to. What kind of feedback are you getting over there, Charles? Real quick, what kind of intel are you getting? What kind of feedback are you getting from these kind of conversations?
You know, I'm seeing the needle move, which is why Paul and I have these scenarios where, hey, it looks terrible on ground level while we're doing these things and talking about them and hearing those in life real stories about them. But then we hear the feedback of the subtle changes. It might be one carrier here, might be one driver here, or the emails that come in where people are like, hey, we're moving the needle. You raised awareness enough where we're looking at this. And that's the goal. We might not be able to reshape the wheel, but if we can just get it to stop 1 minute, look, and maybe reevaluate its direction when it's spinning, that's an achievement. We're not trying to fool ourselves that it's not going to change the world, but if we can help one company, one more driver, make the industry that much more attractive. And it seems to be going that way. And we're only in our first full quarter running like this.
I like that. And Paul, you mentioned the also that one driver, one deal. But isn't it, after you've done the one driver, help the one driver, isn't it just one more? And you keep wanting to go one more, so that as you continue on, this is more of a movement type deal instead of just a one stop, one trick pony?
Oh, absolutely. And that's my whole thing is like, the podcast could stop. I'm not going to. Like that's always been my goal. Even when I was working at a trucking company, even now when I make videos, now doing the podcast, I'll find some other way. I don't know what that looks like if I need to, but no, I mean, it just kind of, when I first got into the industry and I started to put the pieces together and like looking at the labor situation and stuff like that, the truck drivers face, like, no, I've got a fire for this and I won't stop. But I guess really the one person, one driver thing is, as long as that happens once, I can look back at any effort I put into this, no matter how big it is, and be happy with it.
Do you have where are we headed here on cents per mile, guys? Where are we headed? I want to know, are we getting, where is it, the 200,000 views? Where is it, do you really want to get to make a difference out there? Not only in the because I think as you get publicity, I think you get attention to your issues. I mean, I truly believe that it comes with both, right? You get one with the other. Where is cents per mile heading, guys? I want to know your future aspirations.
Do you want to take that on, or you want me to take that on?
I'll hop in there for a moment. I mean, so we have a large driver following on it. It's very popular. We did a couple episodes where the drivers were very engaged on the topics, and that's what we're looking for. We want their voices heard, and we want to amplify that. But it always helps, as you said, when you grow a following, and the more your stage grows, the more your reach grows. So that's where we're at. I mean, we're only going 10 episodes in right now, and to see people listing us as their top 5 for freight and logistics and trucking podcast to listen to, that's an honor. And to hear drivers talking about us and people sending us emails, it's trending in the right direction. I think 2023, you're going to see a lot more of cents per mile. You're going to hear a lot more just based on the momentum we're gaining. And we love to hear feedback. If there's an issue we're not thinking about, send it in to us. Let us know. We'd be more than happy to evaluate it and see how we can present it to raise more awareness. It takes a village to do what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm excited to listen to some of the stuff y'all do. And believe it or not, here, a lot of what y'all are discussing for here at BCB Live, it's all about safety, primary and no matter what we talk about. But everything that we've discussed today, whether it be hours of service and the way in which people deal with it and being in a truck that's hot and having to be in the concern of being safe because you can't roll your window down, all of these topics go right back to the idea of creating the best, safest work environment for our truck drivers out there on the road. And I think all of these ultimately do this if they're done well. And when they aren't done well, and all of these things that y'all are dealing with of late creates an unsafe environment for the driver based upon stress and the inability to affect a positive environment for themselves out there. If they're distracted or stressed out or fatigued, they aren't going to be 100%. And I think your guys' message is right on target with what we're doing here about safety, because you're addressing some of the issues and concerns and you're interacting with those drivers. I hope and I challenge you guys to continue with the back thought in your mind that safety always be there for you. It was funny yesterday. I asked Paul about safety, and he was like, well, I'm probably not the safest guy on the planet. But you know what, Paul? You're addressing some of the safety issues. And for somebody to sit in a closet and do an hours of service experiment, I'm telling you, you're addressing some of the fatigue that goes along worrying about your hours and being out there behind the wheel trying to figure out how to run that time and do that. And I applaud what you guys are doing, and I want to make sure that every listener here listens to Cents Per Mile, because you are tackling the tough topics. If anybody wants to reach out and get a hold of you guys, or listen to you, where do they go to hear you, especially the drop down that we're going to have today, man, on this documentary?
This is Paul's part, so I'll let him do it. He does the plug well.
Oh yeah. So pretty much we're on YouTube, Cents Per Mile on YouTube at Cents Per Mile. We're on various social media. You can look up Charles Gracey or me, Paul Gibson, on LinkedIn. We do have pages, but we're also very active on our personal pages. Charles has this whole hot seat services thing. That's his main gig. Follow at brightlightsmediakc.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. But yeah, you can watch all the stuff on YouTube. Anywhere you get podcasts, Cents Per Mile is on there. And that documentary will be dropping on the CDL Life YouTube channel.
Paul, why don't you plug both of you over there for you and Charles and state who you are, who you're with, and that you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
Okay. I'm Paul Gibson. Okay. Oh, we're not. Okay. Sorry. Oh, it's live. This is embarrassing. All right. So I'm Paul Gibson. That was my co-host, Charles Gracey. You're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
All right. Thanks, guys, man. I appreciate it. Hey, y'all tune in to Cents Per Mile. We appreciate you guys. Happy holidays and have a great weekend.
See you later.